left a good job down in the city, working for the man night and day. But I never lost 1 minute of sleep, worried about the way things might have been. Yeah, big wheels keep on turning, proud memory keep on burning. Yeah, we're rolling, we're rolling, yeah, we're rolling on the river. Everybody, we're rolling, yeah, we're rolling, yeah, we're rolling on the river.
Occurred to me that do I really want to be on the first one? And I came to the conclusion that I really didn't, because I could anticipate a little bit at that time all the commitments and responsibilities that would go along with being on that first flight. And I was a little apprehensive about all the public appearances and so forth. And I felt, gee, if I want to do it, fine. The second flight is going to do the same thing, maybe a little more. Why not go on that one instead of the first? At the time, you feel very much, or I did feel very much on stage. 240,000 miles away, it doesn't seem like on stage, but when you know that millions of people are watching on television, listening to your voice, you're, in a word, apprehensive of not doing something wrong or not fulfilling what's expected of you.
How disappointed were you that you were the second man on the moon and not the first?
I liked to be associated with the fact that I was on the first lunar landing mission instead of being the second man to walk on the moon. But it doesn't bother me particularly. It irritates the heck out of my father, though. He's always looking out for the best things for his offspring.
Can you remember if you were disappointed when the decision was taken, a month or so before you actually went to the moon?
Oh, yeah, certainly disappointed. But I think that my life would have been a little more hectic had I been the first. Who knows, I might even decided to become a college professor the way Neil did.
You'd do it all again?
Yeah, I'm sure there'd be trying moments if I did it again. But having gone through it once, I'd be a much smarter person.
And yet, Buzz, it almost destroyed you.
Right. But I think I'm a better man for having experienced it. At the time, you feel very much, or I did feel very much on stage. 240,000 miles away. It doesn't seem like on stage, but when you know that millions of people are watching on television.
Do you know why you wanted to become an astronaut?
It, I guess, was the epitome of the perfect job for a fighter pilot or a test pilot. It enables you to go faster, higher, further. And I think that is what my life was all about. If there was an opportunity to try and do something, I wanted to try and do it.
Well, you were selected for the last Gemini flight, which was very successful, and then you were selected for the Apollo, for the first Apollo moon landing. How did that come about now?
Well, in between the two missions, I was on the backup crew for Apollo 8, which was the first flight that orbited around the moon, if you remember Christmas in 1968. Neil Armstrong and I were on the backup crew for that mission. And shortly after that, there were two more missions necessary before the first landing mission could take place. And the way that the rotation of crews went, we knew that there would be at least that many before we might be on as a primary crew. And it turned out just right that we waited two missions and were on Apollo 11, and Apollo 11 was selected to be the first landing mission. Really, the point I'm trying to make is that we were fortunate by just being in the right place at the right time, rather than any specific quality that either Neil or I or Mike Collins had to single us out as being more desirable than anyone else was for that flight. We were just lucky.
Now, the three astronauts who were going on the first moon land, not the first moon landing, but on the first orbit around the moon, they all perished while waiting on the launching pad. There was a flash fire. When it came to your turn to lie on the launching pad and wait to go up into the atmosphere, were you not a bit apprehensive?
We were fighter pilots, we were test pilots, and if we were uncomfortable with dangerous adventures, dangerous portions of the mission, if we were uncomfortable with the point that an engine might fail on an airplane shortly after takeoff, you'd get out of that business. You wouldn't stay in it. So we learned that there was really no place for apprehension and fear in our business.
Did you never allow yourself to think, well, we're going on a trip which nobody's ever been on before, we may never get there, and even if we get there, we may never come back? Didn't you think this?
Well, it's rather hard to recall exactly what was going through your mind at a lot of times, but I do remember some time when we were on the surface of the moon, and I think actually when we were outside, the sort of nebulous thought coming to me that here were two people obviously further away from home in terms of the necessary things that were required to get them back home. Two people further away from home than two people have ever been before, but there are probably more human beings watching and paying attention to our very movements right this moment than any people have been before. And that's sort of an unusual...
You were aware of that, were you, at the time?
I certainly was, yes. I was quite aware throughout the entire mission that we were on center stage to a degree, that we were being watched. And I think both of us were conscious of the extraordinary responsibility that was on our shoulders to carry out the mission correctly and to make sure that if there were things that would prevent us from successfully completing the mission, that they would not be things that would be our fault in case they went wrong.
And when you were walking about on the moon, when you took those first hesitant steps, was anything different to what you expected it would be?
It was very unusual the way the dust would not cloud and would go out, radiate around, and then hit the ground. it had not occurred to me, nor to other people, I guess, that it would be difficult to tell when we were standing perfectly upright. It was also very clear to see, looking out toward the horizon, that we were not on a flat, level terrain. No one could ever make a statement that the moon is flat the way that people thought that the Earth was flat. It was very obvious that it curved away. I was a little surprised when, in the midst of our initial activities on the surface, Houston Control Center called and told us to stand by for a minute, that the president wanted to talk to us on the phone. But it struck me as a little bit unusual that we would stop doing what we were doing to have a conversation with the president.
And then when you saw the Earth as this small blue ball miles and miles away, did you have any new thoughts about it?
I don't think so. We had kept in our minds for many years that we might one time in our lives be in this situation. And I think once selected for the mission, we had a lot of time to think about what our thoughts might be. And I don't recall any spur-of-the-moment unusual thoughts. It did occur to me that as I looked up to see the Earth, that it was very small, even though intellectually I knew that it was 4 times larger in the sky than the moon appears to us at night. It still, since that was home, it looked rather small and a long ways away.
Well, you all got back to a terrific welcome on Earth, and then the president sent you off in his plane to go around, I think, something like 45 days in 26 countries in 45 days. How did that work out for you and your wife, because she had to go along too?
That was a very hectic period. It was 45 days visiting about 25 different cities. And the whole idea of being involved in a press conference or airport welcoming remarks or appearing at a men's luncheon, Rotary Club, something like that, preparing to be able to say what I felt the people wanted to hear, many times was just a very prolonged agony for me. So much depended on just how much of an extrovert, how good you were at being comfortable discussing things in front of an audience. If that made you feel comfortable, you were a hit. If it didn't make you feel comfortable, then I feel that you were in for a rough time and a lot of agonizing moments. You see, I didn't feel like I was ideally suited in that role. I felt that as an engineer, as an academic person, as a fighter pilot, I was suited to that profession. As an astronaut, I worked well. As a public figure, I didn't care for that role, and I didn't care for the way I felt I performed in that role.
Well, then you sought help, as you've explained, from the psychiatrists, and what did you learn from them?
I'm not sure really what I learned. I learned that it was okay to not be perfect all the time, and that in itself gave me a bit of relief. To having been demanding perfection out of myself and then seeing that I couldn't do that, and then learning that it was okay to do that, and it was also all right to tell people about that.
Born in the town of Montclair, New Jersey in 1930, Edwin Eugene Buzz Aldrin would not allow that to happen either. Flight was in Buzz's family genes.
My mother was born in 1903, the year of the Wright brothers, and my father was an early pioneer. After he learned to fly in the service, he commanded the Air Corps Engineering School in Dayton, Ohio, for about 5 years. And it was that institution that later became the Air Force Institute of Technology that paid for my doctor's degree at MIT. So it really kind of came around.
In Korea, communists took on capitalists. It was Buzz's first brush with the Cold War.
I'm stationed here at an advanced base in Korea, flying with the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing.
In 1953, cameras mounted on Buzz's own aircraft captured a series of extraordinary images. A Soviet pilot shot down by Buzz, ejecting from his stricken MiG.
I remember my 37th mission rather vividly. That was the mission I got my first MiG destroyed.
Had you by that stage started to dream of being an astronaut?
Well, I was a fighter pilot in Germany, and I was reading in Life magazine, just like many other people, the selected people to fly in a one-man Mercury craft. And it said that these are all qualified test pilots. And that had not been in my projected career field to become a highly coordinated reporting on airplanes coming on. I was clearly interested in beyond that, into the future. Buzz
moved into academia, completing a PhD on rendezvous in space. While he worked, America's Mercury program struggled to keep up with the Soviets. And in 1961, the Russians beat them again. On April the 12th, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. President Kennedy took up the challenge.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
And that became your text as well as John F. Kennedy's?
Yes, and when he made that speech before Congress, I was at MIT working on my studies because I knew that there was a two-man program to follow Mercury, and that they were going to demonstrate rendezvous, computer reentry, spacewalking, long-duration flights, before to really be ready to go into the three-man Apollo program. And of course, that was going to carry out this May 1961 commitment before the end of the 60s. I tried to apply when my good friend Ed White, he rotated back from the squadron that I was in Germany, and went through the test pilot school. He said, "It's 1962, Buzz, and NASA is looking for a new set of astronauts." And he said, "I'm going to apply." And I said, "Well, I'm going to apply too." First time, of course, I didn't meet the test pilot requirement, but they changed that in 1963.
How did you get the news that you were going to be part of the astronaut program?
In October of 1963, I received a phone call from Deke Slayton. He said, "How'd you like to join the astronaut corps?" I was going to be on a backup mission and might fly on a mission after the last one. In other words, it was dead-ended assignment, except that there was a tragic accident and my backdoor neighbor was killed in a crash in St. Louis. And that opened up Jim Lovell and I to be on the backup crew of Gemini 9 and the primary crew on Gemini 12.
I'm back in my element. I'm back on my grind. This is irrelevant. All that matters is the climb. I'm such a perfectionist, so everything gotta be right. Just setting a precedent. This right here's a testament to my sacrifice. Back in my element. I'm back in my element. I'm back in my. If they don't want let them in, gotta leave them all behind. I here like a veteran, but I ain't even hit my
time. You feel very much, or I did feel very much on stage.